Daniel was a nobleman's son who was taken as a hostage, after the northern kingdom of Israel was destroyed by Assyria, and the southern kingdom of Judah was attacked and surrendered to Babylon. The kingdom of Judah was invaded 3 times by Babylon. After winning the Battle of Gilead against the Egyptian army, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon continued to expand his territory into Syria and Palestine. Thus, in September 605 BC, he first attacked Jerusalem. In response, King Jehoiakim of southern Judah surrendered and paid tribute to Nebuchadnezzar. At this time, Nebuchadnezzar took the royal family and nobles as hostages to prevent Judah from resisting again. This is when Daniel and his friends were taken to Babylon. Later, Nebuchadnezzar attacked Egypt in 601 BC, but failed to conquer the country. Jehoiakim, who had been paying tribute to Nebuchadnezzar for 3 years, betrayed Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon and turned to Egypt again, refusing to listen to the words of the prophet Jeremiah. Jehoiakim was originally a king established by Beranu of Egypt. When King Yoshia, who pursued a pro-Babylonian policy, died in battle with Bar-Nebo, who was on a campaign to attack Assyria, his son Jehoahaz succeeded him as king. However, Bar-Nebo of Egypt deposed Jehoahaz and made Eliakim, the son of Yoshia, king, changing his name to Jehoiakim. Then, in 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon invaded Jerusalem for the second time. However, when Nebuchadnezzar invaded, Jehoiakim had already died and his 18-year-old son Jehoiakim had been on the throne for only 3 months. At this time, Jerusalem in Judah was conquered by Babylon again, and 10,000 people, including the royal family, aristocrats, and important technicians, were taken to Babylon as prisoners. Among them was Ezekiel. Jehoiakim was taken to Babylon and imprisoned there for 37 years, but the king who succeeded Nebuchadnezzar later pardoned Jehoiakim while he was in prison, and even though he was a prisoner, he was treated as a deposed king until his death. Nebuchadnezzar, who captured Jerusalem for the second time, instead of capturing the young Jehoiakim, made Mattaniah, who was the son of King Josiah and the uncle of Jehoiakim, change his name to Zedekiah and made him the new king. And Nebuchadnezzar's third invasion of Judah took place in 588 BC. Nebuchadnezzar established Zedekiah as the king of Judah, who was caught in the factional strife between the pro-Egyptian and pro-Babylonian factions within the kingdom of Judah and eventually succumbed to the pro-Egyptian faction. When he betrayed Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar was enraged and invaded Judah again. And after a year and a half of resistance, Judah collapsed in 586 BC. At this time, the walls of Jerusalem were destroyed, and the temple was completely destroyed, and most of the Jews who survived were all taken to Babylon at this time. Nebuchadnezzar left only the humble people in the land of Judah to become vineyard managers and farmers. Some of the surviving royal and aristocratic families, who were pro-Egyptian at the time, defected to Egypt, and the prophet Jeremiah was also taken to Egypt and killed there. The return of the Jews who had been taken captive to Babylon was only possible after King Cyrus of Persia overthrew Babylon and established the Medo-Persian Empire in 539 BC. Cyrus, the king of Persia, issued an edict, allowing the Jews to return to their ancient homeland of Jerusalem in 538 BC. Thus, about 50,000 Jewish captives returned for the first time, with Zerubbabel and Joshua as their leaders, and began building the temple. The temple was completed in 515 BC. It took about 70 years from the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 586 BC to the rebuilding of the temple in 515 BC. In the end, the 70-year period of Babylonian captivity was fulfilled, just as Jeremiah had prophesied. Daniel was a prophet who was taken captive during the first invasion of Judah by Babylon, and officially worked in Babylon until 583 BC, the first year of the reign of Cyrus, the king of Persia, who conquered the Babylonian Empire. Daniel was taken captive to Babylon as a boy, 8 years before Ezekiel was taken captive, in the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim, and spent the entire period of his captivity there. Daniel was so wise that he even rose to the position of prime minister in the Babylonian and Persian empires. As such, Daniel was widely known among the Jews of his time as a righteous and wise man. Daniel was taken captive to Babylon in his youth, 8 years before Ezekiel was taken captive, and spent the entire period of his captivity there. He was officially active in Babylon until 583 BC, the first year of the reign of Cyrus the Great, who conquered the Babylonian Empire. However, apart from the fact that Daniel was a member of the royal family of the tribe of Judah, we do not know much about his family background. He was handsome and intelligent, and lived until the 3rd year of Cyrus, 536 BC. Therefore, he must have been a boy around 605 BC when he was taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar. If Daniel was 16 years old when he was taken into captivity, he would have been 85 years old in the 3rd year of Cyrus. First, Daniel and his friends decided to refuse the idol offerings and to keep their faith, even if it meant going to office. The Babylonian Empire wanted to discover and appoint talented people among those who were taken into captivity through its policy of harmony. Daniel and his friends refused to eat the food offered to them by the king, even though they knew that they would be killed if they did. At this time, Daniel and his 3 friends entered the talent training center. Ezra, the chief eunuch in charge of the royal palace, was in charge of this. Babylon wanted to find talented young men from the kingdom of Judah, who were from royal or noble families, had a good appearance, were talented, intelligent, and knowledgeable. This policy of recruiting talent from foreign countries was not only for the Israelites, but also for other peoples. This seems to have been done with the overall policy of assimilation of the Babylonian Empire, and with the ultimate goal of annihilation of the nation in mind. In order to firmly establish itself as a global empire, it was a strategy that was urgently needed to recruit talented people from the people of the dominated countries and make them Babylonian. The king wanted to make them public servants, who would assist the king in his duties as a non-native by having them undergo special training at the palace. The special training at the palace was a 3-year course. The boys, who were selected through a strict process, had to learn the Chaldean studies associated with the identity of Babylon, and broaden their knowledge and understanding of their general customs. Through such an educational process, they gradually became familiar with Babylonian civilization and culture. In addition, Nebuchadnezzar intended to make the young boys feel attached to Babylon by educating them at the special royal school he had established. King Nebuchadnezzar ordered that even the talents from the fallen kingdom be treated with the utmost care. So, the king had them served the delicacies he ate and special wine. Furthermore, he had them supplied with all the daily necessities they needed. This was indeed a tremendous privilege. At the time, ordinary people had difficulty even approaching the king and the palace. Even if they were from Babylon, they could not easily approach the king and the palace. However, it was a great privilege to eat and drink the king's delicacies and wine in the vicinity of the king as a foreigner from a conquered country. However, Daniel and his 3 friends were not educated at the royal school for the sake of personal success and prosperity, but as a means to fulfill God's wonderful will. Therefore, Daniel and his 3 friends did not take pride in being educated at the royal school, or see it as a path to success and prosperity. In their hearts, they had only complete faith in God. Moreover, the royal school was an enviable place for those without faith. But Daniel and his 3 friends knew that they were being forced to give up everything that was unique to their people. First, they were forced to change their names to Babylonian names. Daniel and his friends had no choice but to change their names to Babylonian names. The eunuch called Daniel Belteshazzar, Ananiah Shadrach, Meshach, and Azariah Abednego. The renaming to Babylonian names meant that they were forced to give up their national identity and live as citizens of the Babylonian kingdom. This was ultimately an extension of the policy of annihilation of the nation. It was a challenge to abandon the identity of the Israelite nation and completely change it to the identity of the Babylonian Empire. The Israelites lived by strict dietary regulations according to the law. However, the first problem that Daniel and his 3 friends faced after entering the royal school was related to food. The food served for them at the palace was the finest food. However, there was unclean food that God's law forbids. There could be various reasons why the food served at the palace was unclean. First, it was clear that the food itself was against the regulations written in the book of Leviticus. Therefore, the food that the Bible defines as unclean should not be eaten. Leviticus 20:25-26. You must therefore make a distinction between clean and unclean animals, and between unclean and clean birds. Do not defile yourselves by any animal or bird or anything that moves along the ground. Those that I have set apart as unclean for you, you are to be holy to me because I, the Lord, am holy. And I have set you apart from the nations to be my own. Among the food served by the king of Babylon, there was pork, which the Jews were not supposed to eat. And it was also offered as a sacrifice to the temple, which would have been participating in idolatry. So Daniel and his 3 friends decided not to eat the food served by the king. So in verse 8 of today's passage, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Second, when Daniel and his 3 friends made up their minds to serve God, God worked on their behalf to grant them favor. In verse 9, it says, Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. Daniel's refusal to eat and drink the food and drink given by the king would be a violation of the king's orders. Nevertheless, when Daniel explained his situation, he was given a way to receive grace. The eunuch was embarrassed because he was told that if he did not eat the king's food and his face was haggard, his head would be cut off. In verses 12 and 13, please test your servants for 10 days, give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. 13 Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. However, the eunuch accepted the proposal and gave them a chance to be tested for 10 days. Daniel and his 3 friends were allowed to eat vegetarian-based food for 10 days instead of the designated food. In verses 14, 15, and 16, it says, So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. 15 At the end of the 10 days they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. 16 So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. The eunuch knew the original purpose of the king's special rules on food and his order to do so. It was not a food rule for religious purposes, but for the purpose of maintaining the health of the boys being educated at the royal school. God allowed the eunuch to test the boys at his discretion and allow them to eat if they were found to be healthy. After testing them with a vegetarian diet and water for 10 days, verse 15 says, at the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. In the end, they were able to maintain their holiness as God's people with the help of God. In the end, God is with those who have set their hearts on Him. We cannot achieve anything unless we set our minds on God. We cannot accomplish anything unless we make up our minds. What was their mind and determination? It was their mind and determination to keep their pure faith before God. They refused the king's delicacies and wine, which were offered to idols, and decided to eat only vegetarian food and drink only water. Have I forgotten my faith in God and become a member of the world, serving and being loyal to the world only? Have I forgotten my noble identity as God's people, God's children, and become like the people of the world, serving and being loyal to the world only? It is time to stop. It is time to stand up like Daniel and his 3 friends. No matter how much the world shakes and people change, I must decide to serve only the Lord. No matter how much faith is shaken and people leave the Lord, I must be determined to serve only God. God is looking for such a person in the last days. God honors those who honor God. In a place where there is no freedom to serve God, Daniel created the freedom to serve God. God is looking for such a person in the last days. God honors those who honor Him. Daniel created the freedom to serve God in a place where there was no freedom to serve God. Even if the world is shaking and people are changing, I must decide to serve only the Lord. Even if my faith is shaken and people leave the Lord, I must be determined to serve only God. In a situation where everyone is forced to live as they are told, Daniel gained the freedom to be different. In response, God gave them 10 times more intelligence and wisdom than all the wise men and Sulgag of Babylon, and set them above all the young men. It is as the saying goes, if he knows me, I will exalt him. Third, God uses people who are set apart like Daniel. The book of Daniel is about the test of choosing faith or unbelief. First, the people of Judah who were taken captive to Babylon were pressured to change their names. This can be said to be a test of their faith as the people of Judah. Daniel was also tested. Daniel's 3 friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not their real names. In verses 6 and 7, it says, among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. 7. The chief official gave them new names to Daniel, the name Belteshazzar to Ananiah, Shadrach to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. So, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were given new names after they were taken into captivity. The meaning of the name Daniel is God is my judge. This name shows that it contains the parents' religious expectations for their beloved son. The name Daniel, which means God is my judge, can be said to be a confession of faith of the Daniel family. However, they were pressured to change their name to Belteshazzar. The word Belt is the name of a foreign god, and this god also had the nickname Nebo. Your protector, Belt. Your protector Nebo means, your protector, not God, but the idol of Babylon. They gave Daniel a very unpleasant name. So, the name Belteshazzar is related to a foreign god. The name Ananiah means who is like God. However, they changed his name to Sadrach, which means learn from the sun god. Rak here is the name of the sun god, who was an idol god, and it seems that they gave him that name with the meaning of learn from the idol god from now on. Mishael means, God is gracious. This name is changed to Meshach. Sakk is the name of the god of lust and greed, who is like the god of desire. And Azariah means, God is my help, which was changed to Abednego. Nego is the name of the moon god, another idol of Babylon, and the word, Abed, means servant. So, it means, you are the servant of Nego. As you can see, they changed the names that contained beautiful confessions of faith in God to names related to the idols of Babylon. Names also serve to make each person aware of their identity. However, the promising young men of Judah were brought to Babylon and were forced to change their names. How did Daniel deal with the temptation and test of having his name changed? First of all, even though his name was changed to that of a conqueror, there is no evidence that Daniel accepted it. Others would have called Daniel by his new name, Belteshazzar. However, Daniel always referred to himself as Daniel. The evidence of this is found in Daniel 8:1, in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign. I, Daniel, had a vision, after the one that had already appeared to me. The people around him and the devil constantly pressured him to change his life with a dark history, but he remained Daniel. He confessed, I am Daniel, which means that he remained faithful to his faith that God is his judge. Daniel was asked to eat the king's delicacies and wine at the training center. However, Daniel made a firm decision not to eat them. This was because the cultural and religious customs of Babylon at the time were such that the food served to the king was first offered to the idols of Babylon before being served. Therefore, eating and drinking the king's delicacies would result in the fact that he would confess that he was offering his heart to the idols of Babylon. Daniel could not accept the demand. Even if he was expelled from the training center and was on the verge of going to prison, he could not abandon God's will. Daniel and his 3 friends made a last-ditch decision to be punished. Verse 8. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. God told Daniel and his 3 friends. Verse 9, now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. Even though they ate vegetarian food. 15. They looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So 16. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. Everything was handled graciously because God was at work. And after all the training, they will go before the king to be tested. At this time, Daniel and his 3 friends were found to be outstanding. This was because God had enlightened them and given them wisdom. So in verses 17 to 20, to these 4 young men God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. 18. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. 19. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Ananiah, Mishael and Azariah, so they entered the king's service. 20. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. How blessed God was to have Daniel and his 3 friends, whose wisdom and intelligence were 10 times greater than that of the whole nation of clappers and soothsayers. God is pleased with the decision of a person of faith who keeps the faithfulness of his or her faith. And God is a God who helps with great grace. Today, the saints of this age are not very interested in being used by God. Rather, they are zealous about worldly matters but neglect the work of the gospel. They put a lot of effort into their own safety, but they don't want to make any effort for the sake of God's name. However, we, who live in the last days, must live as Christ's workers. We must take the opportunity when it is given to us and advance. When we decide to serve God alone by setting our minds on Him in the face of trials and temptations, God begins to help us. I pray that you will become a wise and watchful virgin who is a believer.